Hello, hello, and welcome again. So we're picking up from where we picked up last time. Last time I was talking to myself, and you, the audience, were right there along with me to hear those ramblings. And I had said that I was going to bring in Andrew at some point, but I never did. So I'm bringing him in now. So that first part, just so you know, that was about why I found the resurrection uninteresting and um, something else. I don't, I don't remember actually what uninteresting and what was it? Anyway,
So you did have 3 points there.
I did, and they were all
Uninteresting,
uns.
unconvincing, and
Yeah, unconvincing was the last
um,
one. I mean, we're already off the rails.
interesting,
Why can't
unconvincing.
not important. So not interesting, not important, not believable. That was the name of the blog
That
post.
was nice.
So we talked about why I thought it was not interesting and not important. Andrew was not in on that conversation, though, and so I'm going to leave him some time at the end of this one if he wants to double back and make some comments on that. He will have a chance to do that. But the focus of this one is to talk about why the resurrection is unconvincing. And so I'm going to be looking at um, I not so much, but it. Think about it as looking at the evidences of the resurrection and going through and determining why, as a person who looks at evidence and listens to claims all the time, why I find this one unconvincing. Now, I've actually done tours through the evidence on podcasts in the past, and so I'm not going to recapitulate everything that I've done in previous podcasts. Every time I approach the issue, I try to find a little bit of a new angle. So the last time I spoke about this, it was on the Unbelievable podcast with Jonathan McClatchy. It was Easter, either last year or the year before that. And I believe Andrew has also talked to Jonathan McClatchy about this on Still Unbelievable. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And look, Jonathan's a nice guest to have around, and I know that he's quite popular in Christian circles, but he hasn't moved the needle. It hasn't moved the needle for me, and I guess we're going to get into that. Uninteresting, um, certainly, and unconvincing, I guess, is the ground we're going to cover. I don't think I don't think that Jonathan moves the needle. I think that where you have to start to find Jonathan convincing, I think you have to start with the same sort of motivated reasoning that I think Jonathan starts with.
Yeah. Look, Jonathan, I'm sure he's a nice guy. He's not the smartest man on the internet. Don't buy into that. He may can play 3 games of blindfold chess at one time, but I can play blindfold chess too, and I can make it to about 10 moves uh, before I before my mind breaks. Look, that is not a measure of whether your arguments are good. So these sorts of things are said by way of introduction when people are interviewing Jonathan, and it's fun, I guess. It's kind of impressive in its way, but it has nothing to do with whether the arguments are any good. And
And I don't know that it's true. Um, I uh, there are a number of ways to beat the blindfold the blindfold chess uh, uh, idea. So you can look like you have the skill without it, right? I'm not accusing Jonathan of anything nefarious, but I don't know what the evidence is to back that claim. And how good is he at it? As for instance, does someone have to repeat the moves to him, right? During the course of play. So anybody can play blindfolded chess if somebody's telling you where the pieces are on the board.
sure,
Um,
um,
so
it, I
I,
s-
I would, it's quite an extraordinary claim. It's an unusual skill. It takes a specific kind of memory to get that done.
right.
Um, And that kind of memory, while it is impressive, and it does have potentially to do with intelligence, memory and intelligence do have a link. Um, as you said, it doesn't make a better argument.
Right. It doesn't. It just. There are a lot of really intelligent people who made terrible arguments. Uh,
Well, and who don't
Pascal
play blindfolded chess.
and who does. So, um, so I look. I don't mean to bag on Jonathan. I didn't even really mean to bring him up, except to say that the last time I spoke about this on the mic, it was with Jonathan, and mistakes were made on both sides, mostly tactical errors. I mean, he had his pretty set list of things that he talks about when he talks about the resurrection. You can listen to him um, on YouTube talking about the resurrection, and it's the same speech pretty much every time. So he's very easy to prepare for in that sense. And I wanted to bring something different to the table on that show, and I feel like I did. I'm pretty happy with the thesis that I brought there, even though I didn't get a chance to fully explicate it, as I knew that I wouldn't. There was a blog post there. If anyone is interested in you write me, just drop something on the board. Hey, I missed that. Can you shoot me that blog post or include it on the board? I'll do it. Otherwise, I won't. So I will have to see that at least one person has taken enough interest to do that before I go back and try to dig that up again. So I am going to try to bring a few new things to the table. We've got a list of 8 bullet points in front of us right now. These are bullet points, and this is a show. I give up. I give up. Um, so that said, you can read the blog post, the entire blog post, all 2,500 words of it. Sorry, not sorry. At skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Just look at the last one. It's resurrection, not interesting, not important, not convincing. And there is now a blog post underneath that, and not just a video. This video will also be there, and you can sign in to discuss and comment. So, with that said, let's jump right in. Andrew, I'm going to start with 3 points that are not in the blog post. So, as is my way, I write a blog post, and that usually ends up being the outline that I want to use to talk about. And then I often don't talk about what's in the blog post. I do plan to get to what's in the blog post, but I want to start with some things that are not in the blog post. One other thing before I get in there, I'm sorry about the all the housekeeping here, folks. So I'm using a different setup. I've been retooling for a new project. I've got things pretty much tooled up the way I want to. So Andrew's audio notwithstanding, it should be just fine. How does my audio sound? How does it sound? Is it good? Is it not good? Let me know. Any constructive criticism or non-constructive criticism, I'll take it all. Let me know. I'll make my final adjustments before I actually begin. Excuse me, the recording work there. But consider this setup golden master. So you nerds know what I'm talking about. So Jesus made no attempt to convert the Jews after his resurrection. He appeared to no one who mattered to history. So, yeah, even my bullet points in my own private notes are long. Sorry about that. Again, not sorry. So why am I unconvinced by this story? Am I such a hyper skeptic that I just won't believe anything? Have I been burned
Yes.
so many times in my life that I just can't love again? Um, I don't think that's it. In fact, if you did an inventory of things that I believed in right now, I think you would find at least 3 or 4 wild ass things that I cannot validate, but really do kind of believe. So I don't think it's that I am incapable of believing things that I can't absolutely prove. And I don't think it's that I'm so hyper skeptical that, I just can't buy any claim that doesn't have a lot of 100% evidence behind it, that sort of thing. And Andrew, I know this is true for you because I mean we talk a lot off mic. You believe some pretty wild ass crazy shit too. Um, so I don't, I shouldn't be admitting this for you. What I'm saying is we're not hyper skeptical. So for the audience that just hears us on podcasts and sees what we write, I can just tell you, speaking personally, we're as whacked out as most people. But
right? And when I hear people use the phrase hyper skeptical, what I often think they mean is, well, you're just cynical. I'm actually not cynical. Um, I'm I'm a little bit in the vein of someone like uh, oh, who's the Harvard researcher? Our Better Angels.
I know what you're
You know,
talking about.
look,
Feinbaum.
you
Fine.
do. He comes up
Yeah,
between us
yeah, no.
anyway. Look, here's my point. I do think that humans are getting better over time, as a for instance, and so I'm not cynical actually, although I will say do better on gun control, folks. So, but I'm not cynical. I am not hyper skeptical, uh, and so I think to your point here about Jesus not appearing to anyone important. Here's what I think Christians would say. I think they would say, but David, Jesus did. He did appear to the most important people in history, because after all, his plan unfolded as he intended. And what would they mean by that? Well, they would say, but Christianity's well, they wouldn't use popular because they're scared of the popularity fallacy, but what they mean is that Christianity is the most popular religion in the world. And so I think they'd say, but Jesus did appear to important people in history. And uh, you skeptics, when you say he didn't, you are being hyper skeptical. That's what I think they would say.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that argument, but I might get to this later. They're wrong. First of all, if his plan unfolded the way he intended, is a bad plan. And Christians actually shouldn't brag about it unfolding the way he intended. So if you just take gross numbers, Christianity depends on what metric you are using. A little over 2 million, the population, maybe as high as 2.3 in some scales, but um, we're talking about a third or less than a third of the population. That means 2/3 of the population are just going to hell. Some version of hell. So if that's the plan, shitty plan. Um, and so I question whether the plan is really unfolding the way anyone would want to brag about. And furthermore, this is a kind of a fallacy with Christians. It's a uh, have cake and eat it too fallacy.
Mm,
And that is, yeah, it's a really big number when we want it to be a really big number, but it's a really small number when we want it to be a really small number. So if you tell Christians that, yeah, but according to every statistic that you can measure, the majority of Christians believe that homosexuality is okay, that it is not a sin, in fact, and that they also believe that abortion is okay and not a sin. And then they would say, well, yeah, but by what measure are they Christians really? Are they real Christians? No, they're not real Christians at that point. So you don't actually have 2 billion Christians in the world, maybe more like a few 100,000. So it just depends on what argument they're trying to defend at the time. I didn't even mean to
sure,
go
sure.
here. I'm sorry. Jesus made no attempt to convert the Jews. So here's the thing. If Jesus, God, was a person who wanted to save everybody, I just want you to take that story on board, take that idea on board for a moment. Those of you who are listening out there, if this was his goal, uh, then it seems the most direct. And also, if he had a real burden for the Jews, remember, Jesus wept, the shortest passage in the Bible, that has to do with the Jews, his feelings about the Jews. He wept over their condition. Um, Jesus wept. If he had this burden in his heart for the Jews, when he rose from the grave would have been an excellent time for him to go knock on the door of Sanhedrin court member number 1, 2, and 3 and say, "Hi guys, you remember you killed me the other day? I'd like to renegotiate the interpretation of what Messiah means. Do you have a minute?" That would have been a fantastic opportunity for that. It did not happen. He could have even taken his message broader. He could have. Look. I believe this is possible. I believe that Jesus could have gotten an audience with Pilate because he had an audience with Pilate the other day, and he could have just said, "Hey, Pi, can I call you Pi? Um, you killed me the other day, but you had a really good heart about you, and I just wanted to talk to you about maybe the future of the empire and what it means to be Messiah and how we can help each other." I think Jesus could have done that. Heck, call me crazy. I think he could have gotten an audience with Caesar. I, there's Jesus could have done any of this. He could have gotten an audience with all of the most important people in the world, and he could have made sure that there were really good scribes available for those audiences. Did he do any of this? No, because he apparently didn't give a tinker's damn about whether anyone who was his quote unquote enemy knew that he rose. So I'm sorry. I find that to be um, an unforgivable oversight or just really bad storytelling. At any rate, if you're a God who just rose from the grave and you're trying to save as many people as possible and you don't do this, I don't even care about the rest of your story.
I guess for me, there's a there's a parable about a lost sheep, and the idea is that God will seek out this one very lost person, right? That God is always extending an opportunity to come home. Now, the parable is poor, right? Because the idea is this shepherd's actually out looking for this one lost sheep. I don't see I'm an atheist, but when I was a Christian, I had problems with the idea that there was a God who was actually actively looking for the lost. Why? Because there was a doctrine in the way. Broad is the gate, right? And so I think we could reasonably ask, it is asked of Christians, what does a man profit if he gains the whole world but he loses his soul? I think there's a reasonable return question. What does a God profit if he gains the whole world or claims the whole world and loses a single soul? Let me ask it another way. If free will is if libertarian free will reigns supreme, but we think that all people can be saved, if that is your version of Christianity, that you think that God is extending an open opportunity to all humans, and that in fact anyone can be saved. That's part of the Great Commission. You go into all the world, you preach the gospel to every creature, and the reason you do is because the right words at the right time can save any soul. Then surely the question that you should be asking is, Why doesn't the most powerful intellect in the universe simply press the pause button on time for us? Because there is no running out the clock on God. The clock can't be run out on him. And the idea is that he can put us all in a place where the clock doesn't run out on us either.
Well,
If
so
you believe in
sorry,
libertarian, sorry, let me just put a bow on
this is
this.
my
If you
bad.
believe in libertarian free will, and you think that the right words at the right time can save everyone, then all your God has to do is reason with each soul independently.
Okay. So yeah, I think the story is lacking there in imagination at the very least. See, if this were a real event, you would have a Jesus doing this, but this is a story, and part of the thing that the story has to explain is the point that I'm going to come to at the end, which is where's Jesus? So, I mean, people could have asked that in the first century too. Where's Jesus? Then, if this happened, he was crucified, was buried in a bespoke tomb, and rose shortly after that and appeared to his disciples. Then where is he? You have to come up with a reason why you can't produce him. And I think that so much of this resurrection story um, is there to answer those questions without having to produce a Jesus. And so one of the things that you kind of have to answer is, well, fine, if he did that, then why didn't he show up in front of the same people who killed him and convert them? Because that's pretty powerful testimony right there. And he couldn't have been afraid for his life. They couldn't have laid a hand on him. So what? I mean, what? So point number two.
After he's risen, what are you going to do? Are you
Well,
going to kill him again? I mean,
but he
so
could move through crowds or walls or whatever. When the writers needed him to escape, he could just do it magically. So that can't be a concern for why he didn't show up, in the middle of the temple and hold a tent meeting to end all tent meetings, um, with a multitude of Jews crying, "Crucify him!" They would have all been there. They would have all been witnesses. Imagine the Jewish story then. Um, Point number two. We got 8 points. We're gonna go faster. I promise, people. I promise.
liar.
We're gonna
Okay,
we're gonna get through at least 4 of these. We might have to do another recording. Um, he made no effort to preserve any hard evidence. Hi, Teddy.
he
Um,
did.
I
He
So for anyone who cares, I do care deeply about Teddy. I know that she's been working very hard on some shroud work that she's doing. I don't know how much of it is public right now, but she made at least one public announcement. She was named to the board of some prestigious organization regarding the shroud. So she is an official shroud
um,
authority.
I've got to know. Look, I've just got to know. Are there important organizations where the shroud is concerned? Is that really
There
a
there
thing?
are any organization that my
No.
friend is on is important. Uh,
Okay.
that's how I'm
All
going to
right.
cash that out. So
Sorry, Teddy. Hello.
remember me when you come into your kingdom, Teddy. Um,
She will. You'll be the court crier.
so
It'll sound like weeping and gnashing of teeth.
this is a thing. I had to mention the shroud here because my point is that Jesus didn't do anything to leave any hard evidence, and the shroudies out there, the crazies, the nut jobs, the wackadoos. You know who you are. and you know what you are. So don't even bother getting offended. Um, at any rate, they would say, well, sure he did. He left us the shroud. Well, first of all, if he was going to leave us a lasting testimony like that, maybe he could have mentioned it, to his disciples. By the way, guys, go back in the tomb, pick up that shroud. I'm leaving it as a lasting testimony of all time. And one of the things that would have made it, a more convincing piece of cloth is if he had said that at the time, it had been written down, and he had said something like, "Oh, and I'm also leaving one of the nails from the cross, a real one. It's got my DNA in it. Don't worry. I know you guys don't know what DNA, but those people in the future, they're going to love it. And furthermore, these symbols that I'm leaving, it'll be impossible to steal or corrupt them. And they will be able to test them for all time. It'll be as a lasting testimony that these events happened." He could have done that. How hard would that have been for him to do that? It wouldn't have been hard at all. But he wasn't interested in leaving some kind of lasting, uh, tr- true, hard proof testament of the events that supposedly took place. And people say, well, you can't prove history, so nothing he did would have proven. You know what? It would have gone a long ways had we found uh, in the tomb that was clearly marked a nail, with blood on it, that was clearly and always dated to his time and place and was uncorruptible. Um, that would have been amazing. Could
You'll
could have
remember
happened.
the name of this episode. I don't off the top of my head, but there's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation toward the end of the series. The Enterprise approaches some little space probe, and they take on board, and Picard opens this little box, and inside it there's a musical instrument.
Ah,
Right,
yes.
when he picks it up, Picard uh, goes through a long mental episode, and the whole show is about Picard being transported in his mind by this musical instrument to a place where he's an integral first person participant in the culture of this ancient civilization that eventually dies, right? But he's a first person participant. He experiences the culture of this place. He learns their skills. He has a family with children, and he learns and participates uh, in uh, the project to set this little probe, build it, and set it off into the universe to eventually be discovered. And so there's this movie of the life of this civilization that plays in his head. And I think that episode is, it's a better version of the shroud. Do you remember the episode name? I don't.
I don't remember
Uh,
the name, and the plot point is a little bit different than the way you described it, but I know what you're talking about. And for those who are questioning my nerd uh, credentials, whereas I don't remember the name of that episode, I can tell you that the instrument, often mistaken for a flute, was actually a tin whistle. Anyway,
I never
um,
called it a flute.
no, I know that you
Um,
didn't, but many who would recognize the episode made that mental mistake because it's
right.
made all the time.
And in fact,
Tin whistle.
that instrument shows up uh, in later in later episode.
It does.
Picard plays it.
It's one of the few situations in Star Trek where the writers and characters actually remembered what they did from some other time because
Right, that instrument remains in his ready room, actually.
yeah, there's a whole
Um,
episode where he has a love interest that where that instrument uh, figures in too when
right.
he brings in a new stellar
So it's a
cartographer.
better shroud. right? It's a better shroud.
Right.
And
It was a piece of evidence that this thing actually happened. And you could see it and you could touch it, and I imagine you could date it, and they could it there it is. This was real, and you may not can validate everything that Picard said that he saw in his experience, but you could validate something, and Jesus could have done that for the resurrection as well if he had cared to do so. But
that's actually my point about the shroud, right? Why is it not that when some people touch the shroud, because some people get to touch this claimed magic artifact, why does it lay there like a piece of cloth? Why are we scientifically dating it? Why is there a debate about it? It's magic.
well, sure. All the bald men should instantly grow hair, and there'd be no need for Viagra for anyone who came near it. I'm sure there could be some powers, but I mean, the one thing that you would expect minimally is that, of course, we're going to test it. It would never fail a test. Even if
Right?
they tested it
You can't
wrong,
break
it would
magic.
always come up with the right answer. And this just doesn't look. That's point number two. Six more. Can we make it? Or are we going to have to stop at four? Um, I'm going to get through at least five of this. God damn it. There. So here we go. So much more to be said. I prepared Andrew for this by saying there would be some pontification. So sorry.
Shocking. I know everyone's thinking, oh, shocking. That must have been a revelation for him.
Yeah, these aren't even the good points. So the third one that's here that's not in the notes. This one is important to me. I've done a little bit of journalism, not a lot. I mean, I do a lot of writing, and sometimes news writing. Very little of what you would call journalism. But one of the things that you would do is follow up, especially if you've got a very um, important story. Something very important. You know who the characters are and the people involved. You'd have some follow up because those people are important just by nature of the fact that they were an integral part of the very important story. So, with the story that we have, there was no follow up of any kind with any of the important people. So, I think one of the most important people uh, in this story is Joseph of Arimathea, because if not for Joseph of Arimathea, the body of Jesus would have just been tossed in some common grave, because that's what they would have done. And then the Christians would lose out on a very important talking point for them. So you need the tomb. Well, how do you get the tomb? Well, you need to have a rich person who was a follower of Jesus, which is not easy because Jesus hated rich people and money. Come at me, bros. So you've got to give him a loyal, rich follower, because you know why? Tombs are expensive. So, um, and by the way, even today, the good tombs are expensive. Um, so we got this guy, and he comes up. It's kind of a shadowy figure. He's afraid of the Jews, but he's a part of the Jewish council, and he's got a name. He's Joseph of Arimathea, but it's all secret. And I'm going to do this thing, and it's even more than that. He goes to Pilate and he requisitions the body of Jesus. How did he get an audience with Pilate? How did he get an audience with Pilate? Does just anyone just walk into Pilate's office? Hey, yo, can I have that body? You remember the insurrectionists, right? Can I have it? And Pilate's like, yo, cool. And that's it. There's
No, look, he was a huge contributor to Pilate's reelection campaign. That's how
obviously,
he. That's,
obviously, um,
how he got
obviously,
it. That's
there's
how he does the job.
there's some follow up that needs to happen for this guy, if no one else. You know how
I
much of
just
the
want to know, how do you even in Roman times? I'm quite serious about this. Even in Roman times, how do you requisition a dead body?
well,
I look.
you
I don't
walk
care that.
into
Look,
Pilate's
I'm
office
serious.
and you
Okay, so let's
ask.
just say you're a huge contributor to Pilate's reelection campaign. So you you get to see him, however you do that job, right? Does nobody say, or Joseph, um, that seems a little wacky even for you, dude. I mean, what does that conversation look like? How do you?
Look, so Darren uh, got after me a little bit with the last one because he said about 25 minutes. I went back and listened. I see what he's talking about. He's saying about 25 minutes into that show, I said something to the effect that, at this point, the story gets ridiculous. And he was like, 25 minutes in, it only got ridiculous then. So I want to be careful not to do that here. This whole thing is ridiculous, Darren. I recognize that. But really, this is another one of those points where the story just kind of goes off the rails. And unknown shadowy figure from the Sanhedrin walks in the pilot's office and says, "Hey, can I have that body?" And pilot, no paper.
And
There's
he
no
says,
paperwork.
sure.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Happy Hanukkah. So, um, right. So that's of course one part of the ridiculousness, but the other part of the ridiculous is, the next time you hear the name Joseph of Arimathea, never. Never. He's lost in his. He doesn't become a disciple. He never comes out of the a closet anyway. So or he does, and he founds three churches, but nobody cares. I don't know what the story is. No, there's zero follow up on Joseph of Arimathea. The women who found Jesus at the tomb, the women, whole knitting circle, whatever it was. All,
Heaven. Oh, sorry.
we don't
Sorry.
cover right. That's stop it. Um, they
What do you call it
they prefer Wigan.
when you
Um,
what do you call it when you face the cardinal corners and you say something and a dude rises from the dead and walks out? I don't know what else to call that.
I've been watching the Amazon Prime series for the Robert Jordan series,
Well time.
and
Yeah.
so I think maybe you would call them Aes Sedai. Um, so these Aes Sedai at the tomb, we never hear from them again. What did they do? I mean, were they a part of any ministry at all? Did they have a house church? Don't know. Don't care. We're done with them. No need to follow up with those guys. Why do we care? The two dudes on their way to Emmaus. And why do I know they were dudes? Because it says they were dudes. Okay, so they were men. And what else do we know about them? There were two of them. What else do we know about them? Nothing. And, no, and apparently nobody cares. These are the first people who had some kind of extended conversation with Jesus after the fact. Do we hear from these guys ever again? No. Do we hear about them? No. At some point, does Peter in some sermon say, and let me remind you of the time when Jesus appeared to these men on their way to Emmaus to make some strong point about the resurrection? No, we don't. We don't hear that.
Uh,
No, in all fairness, he never once says the word Lazarus. Just as Lazarus was raised from the dead, and there he is in the front row there. Just as Lazarus raised from the dead, so was Jesus. No, he doesn't. He doesn't do any of that. So when the gospel writers are done with a character, they're just done. That character doesn't exist anymore. They are never mentioned again. And throughout this whole story, even though you only have really a handful of people involved with these post-resurrection events and such, there's a lot to follow up on for a journalist, and no one does
but
it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that was I was done. I was just saying, if you don't have this kind of, if you've never been involved with or close to writing anyway, maybe this doesn't seem like a strong point to you. But if you're in the business at all, you're scratching your head over the lack of follow up in really all of the stories in the Bible, but especially this one.
But don't you think that the Christians listening would say, David, you're missing the most obvious point. So Christians, I'm going to attempt to throw you a bone here just because um, I'm in the mood to play devil's advocate to some extent. So this is the best I can do for you because I'm an atheist. This is an atheist doing the best he can do for you. By the way, if you can do better, um, I'll have you on Still Unbelievable. I'm sure David will have you here on the show that is not to be named.
Yeah,
But
you can contact
here's
me at Reason Press at gmail.com.
hey. So I think I would say that um, David, you're overlooking the most obvious, and that is that there is follow up. We know quite a lot about Peter. We know quite a lot about Paul. We know quite a lot about Luke. We know a lot about John Mark. We know a lot about Matthew. I know the skeptical objections. You can raise them. Feel free to. Right. I'm not actually objecting to skeptical objections. I'm simply saying that what Christians will say, uh, maybe with some degree of reason, is right, but you can't follow up on every character, and even in our own lives, some people come, some people go, and don't you, David, have friends from the past, and you don't know what happened to them? Didn't they just fall out of your personal story, right? So if you were writing the story of David Johnson's life, wouldn't some characters just disappear? And wouldn't there be other characters that are more like John Mark or Paul or Peter, you know, and you know what happened to them? And aren't those characters, those central characters, the gospel authors?
No, but uh, you can. I hope the devil paid you well for his advocacy. Um,
Well,
he's now going to need to bribe the judge. That's what I'm saying.
According to the Christians, I am not going to be well paid for this.
So here's the problem with it as I see it. First of all, I wasn't raised from the dead. Uh, if I was, the people directly around me at that time would have the hell interviewed out of them for sure by everybody with a microphone, by everyone with a smartphone, by everyone who could write, by everyone who could write their name and nothing more. They would still try it. So, no. First of all, I'm not the center of the most important story the world has ever known, and there's no part of my life that's the most important part of the most important story that's ever been known. And so, no, those people wouldn't just drop out. Secondly, the apostles, I'm sorry, the people who quote unquote wrote the story, Mark, he wasn't a witness. He wasn't there. He actually wasn't one of the people who would have been there. We don't know who his sources would have been. So yeah, I don't think that argument works very well. But I mean, if you just want to say all of the people, these kind of ancillary characters that do fairly important things in the story were just lost to history because no one found them worth following up on, or that they never did anything else in history. And it's really hard to believe that, if you were the guy who saves the body of Jesus, that you don't start a church at some point. That's kind of that's a little bit hard to believe. you are going to, at least do Toastmasters. You're gonna go on a speaking tour. you've got you've got a story. You've got a hell of a story. Um, so no, that doesn't work for me. But this is, once again, this is true throughout the Bible. So it's not just this story; it's every story. Wherever there's some uh, amazing event. In fact, just think of any of the people that were resurrected from the dead. You never hear from them after that. You never even hear their name mentioned after that. They're never alluded to again after that. Um, this is storytelling, not history preserving.
I wonder, um, there are, we talk about in Christian circles the Passion of the Christ as if it's a single, unique cross. Right? You've got Jesus being crucified on this particular day sometime in the past, 29 CE or 31 CE or somewhere in there. Right? Jesus wasn't, according to some counts, the only person crucified that day. Lost those bodies too. Now, one of them, seemingly unimportant to the story, but Jesus calls one of these characters home with him. Don't know that guy? That body is lost. There's no, I guess there's no one around. I mean, when Jesus has, we just ask this. How do we get that story?
Don't
How do
know.
we get that story? Is this is the Holy Spirit relaying a conversation that Jesus had on the cross?
Well,
Because as far as I can tell, that's the thing you've got to believe. So
no, no,
so
no,
some
no,
people
no.
will say,
Mark's great nephew had a drone, and he was nearby, and he flew the drone up near the cross, and the video was wonky, but he got the audio.
uh, so I'm actually quite serious about part of this. Some people don't hold a high view of Scripture. Some people do. This is a common debate, exactly how much esteem do we place around each of these stories. To get the criminal on the cross story, if you don't have a high view of Scripture, what do you do with it? Do you have faith in that story? If you don't have faith in that story, if you think that story is just made up, how do you arrive at faith in the story of the cross at all?
So, looking at the time, this was supposed to be done in 10 minutes. We're going to have to skip some stuff. So, we've got 5 bullet points. Because we have it, this, I'm just now getting to the article. So
That was only number three.
That was number 3. All right. So here's what
Wow.
we got. We got a couple of choices.
Okay.
We can do one more, and we can do another part and finish it, or we can finish it now, maybe go a little long, but take out a couple. So that's your first choice. My choice is to finish it now and take out a couple. And but
Let's finish it.
okay. So what I'm going to
And
do, we're
we'll
going.
just do that.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do? Where is he now? Okay, we're gonna talk Ascension, but of the 4, we're gonna get rid of 2
Let's
of
hit them
them.
all.
You want to hit
Let's
them
hit them
all?
all.
Okay.
We can hit them all, and I will do better if you will.
Well, I'm not gonna do better. So I mean, what kind of promise is that? I'll stop lying if the devil stops. Sure.
Okay, number four. One, two, three. There's number four. What is number four?
Jesus wanted it to be
Um,
a matter of faith rather than evidence. I have talked about this in previous shows before, in previous write ups, so I won't go much further than this, but I really have. What I really want to do is have some Christian of some description. Yes, Peter, even you. I love you, Peter. I want to have Brian with an I. I'll even take you. Um, I want somebody to explain when Jesus
he's not a Christian as far as I can
he
tell. That was
he is
unfair.
for the purposes of this. My
Okay.
standards are
All right.
pretty low. Brian with an I, you are an honorary Christian. Um, we need you, brother. We need you on that side because we got enough people on the other side. So yeah. So I just need one of you, or Andrea. By the way, Andrea, uh, new on the boards, probably been lurking for a long time. There's been some really good posts coming out of that one. So uh, jump in on this one, and I will leave it as enough said for this bullet point. When Jesus says to Thomas, "You believe because you have seen." Basically, you've seen the evidence. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. Just explain that one to me, because I consider that the blind faith manifesto. And
And this one's pretty easy, isn't it? It's
yeah,
there's an obvious question. It gets asked all the time in skeptical circles. Why is your faith in the story better than my lack of faith? And the question behind it is, or the idea behind it is that faith doesn't seem to be a particularly good method for reaching facts about the universe. And so, why faith? Especially blind faith that you're talking about.
right. It really is. See, the reason I say blind faith, and I know that that riles Christians, it literally is the definition of blind faith. It is Jesus literally saying, and by the way, some translations have it putting it in the form of a question. Do you believe just because you've seen? Then he turns around and says, "Blessed are those who will believe on me without seeing." Um, okay, great. But I've got a way to improve that a little bit. Blessed are those who believe based on good evidence, and I'm going to leave you some. So there's an idea, but you know why Jesus didn't say that? It's because there was no Jesus at that certainly at the time that Mark was written, and I'm sorry, this would have been John. There was no Jesus around at that time, and so the evangelist who wrote this work had to put something in the mouth of Jesus to help deal with the doubts that would have been rising in the communities. Because if you'll recall this, I don't want to get into this. This is supposed to be a short one. Jesus was supposed to return by then, and he hadn't. And people are wondering, okay, what's going on? Did this stuff really happen, or have we been duped? The answer is yes, you've been duped. But beyond that, they have to have Jesus giving some kind of answer, and the answer is, look, I want the kind of people who will believe without seeing.
Seems to be backed by the writer of Hebrews too, doesn't it? Hebrews 11 is the faith without sight sort of mantra, and so I know that there are apologetics organizations out there like Reasons to Believe, right? But and while maybe their mission from a Christian perspective is a laudable mission, I don't think that it stacks up particularly well to the case that the New Testament's making.
Right. So, okay. Next bullet point. I could go 30 minutes on that one. His own disciples didn't believe at first. So again, this is one that I have talked about in the past, and I would just point people to the blog post. I think this may be the longest section that I wrote in the blog post, but um, there's this drama around identifying who Jesus is, and the fact is um, nobody recognizes him. Everyone who sees him initially, they don't recognize him. And you might think to yourself, well, that's understandable. Maybe it was dark. Maybe they were just struck by grief or whatever. Just look at all of the other resurrection events that are in the Bible. There is never a time when someone is resurrected and there's some question about the identity. Um, that's just BS. But here, we're kind of given this idea that, well, people didn't know who he was right away, and then when they did kind of know who he was, they didn't believe him. So his own disciples, they still weren't sure. They had to see the death wounds. Once again, I write about this, so I'm not going to get too far into it, but ask yourself, what do the death wounds prove? Just put it in the comments, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. What were the death wounds supposed to have proven? I contend they could prove nothing, even to the people at that time. There's nothing that would have proven. It's an interesting story plot, and I can tell you why, as a storyteller, I think that may be in there. But as far as evidence, it wouldn't have proven anything even to the people there at the time. So what do you think it proved? That's all I'm going to say about that one. Anything? What?
Not much. Not much. I think that it's it is contrary to good reason. By the way, folks, I'm not in the comment section. I am on sabbatical. I have no idea how I ended up here, even talking today, but I won't be in the comment section. Feel free to burn me in effigy. Been burned in effigy before. It doesn't particularly bother me. The thing that bothers me is he was only gone, for a few hours. It wasn't 3 days. Don't care how you read the story. It wasn't 3 days. So he appears to some people pretty quick that don't know him. Let me just say that out loud again. It appears pretty quick to some people, and they don't know him. He appears pretty quick to some people, and they don't know him.
Yeah.
If you're not pausing over that, let me encourage you to examine how much Kool-Aid is left in the pitcher in front of you.
Okay,
far too much.
We got to move on. But honestly, the road to Emmaus guys, they walked like 7 miles, and after he had left, after their eyes had been opened, quote unquote, they were like, didn't his words burn within our hearts? Something like that. I mean, this is not the sort of thing that you say after you've recognized someone,
who died and lived.
He was there 24 hours and 2 seconds ago. He was he kind of sounded like him, right?
I really want to know this. How many, at that place, that time, that culture, how many people do you know that were walking around that had been crucified?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. If my wife died today, may this not happen. May this not happen in my lifetime. But if she died today, today is Monday as we record this, and she came back Wednesday, I would know her.
Okay, let me spend one more minute here. I want to be a little serious about this. So I've attended some lectures and seminars on the crucifixion. We talked about this privately, but so there is this idea that Jesus probably wore robes that covered the marks in the hands and the side and the ankles, and yada yada yada. Okay. But the crown of thorns, was he also wearing a hijab?
Yeah, it's a hoodie. So
Now, I'm not saying that he would still have the crown on. Don't misunderstand me, Christians. That's not what I'm saying. But your your doctrine, the Orthodox Christian view, is that this crown of thorns left substantial marks on him. So even if you think that the body was totally exsanguinated, by the way, if you have no blood in your body, you're not walking around. I don't believe in magic, and there it is. But even if you think that his robes covered all of the all of the possible damage to his body in his wrists, ankles, his back, etc., a spear through the side. How many people do you know at that time, at that place, that went around with head wounds?
okay, okay, but
And if you saw them, wouldn't you think, oh, hey, there's a clue
no, you're being too
to who
generous.
he
I'm
is?
sorry. His was he wearing gloves? I mean, were these the were I mean,
Well,
you would
so
think
I
the
know that,
guys on the road to Emmaus would be like, "Hey, buddy, you okay? I
uh,
you know,
so there's a problem
those
here.
nail
So
holes look pretty fresh."
no, no, look, so let me talk about that for a second. So here's, I know that the Catholics, in particular, have pictures of Jesus on the cross with nails through the palms of the hands. Medical professionals think that that could not be accurate, but that crucifixion can still be saved. And I'll just tell the listeners who don't know this how that's done. And maybe it's not crazy, because today when people do this sort of crucifixion stunt, this is how they do it. You can drive a nail, even quite big nails, between the radius and the ulna. Those are the bones in the arm. And so maybe if you drove a nail between the bones of the forearms rather than through the palm, I mean, you can't hide the ones in the palms of the hands, right? But maybe if you drove them uh, through the forearms, they would be disguised by long robes. Now, the way to save this and say it wasn't the hands, it was actually the forearms, is to say that, well, actually Greeks may have called everything from the tip of the finger to the elbow the hand. This is not my fault, Dave. I'm just
Well, okay, look,
telling you how this is rescued.
I've read as many things about resurrections as you have, and one thing that we should both
Probably
know by
more
now is
than
that resurrection was everything. It was both hands together on a single stake. It was hands stretched out with nails to the hands. It was hands stretched out with nails to the wrist. It was hands stretched out with hands tied to the cross. So maybe you get
uh-huh.
a support. The wrists are tied, and then you get nails in the hands that way. It's all of that. It's whatever whoever's
Sure,
telling the story. Um, it's whichever one of those they want to pick.
sure.
So uh, I mean, there's simply no way to know that. This was the short one, folks. Um, his disciples didn't raise the authorities didn't believe the story. So we've already talked about how he didn't appear before the authorities. So the only thing that I would say is, even if you were generous and say that, well, maybe some authority did find out about it or hear about it at some point, they didn't care because there was no manhunt. Did you notice the absence of a manhunt in the story? And here's the thing: people would say, "Well, why would they do that?" Okay, well, Rome just um, gave capital punishment to an insurrectionist. It's the highest crime in the region. Capital punishment, the highest offense. But I would think that the second highest offense would be escaping. So they would have actually cared about someone if there were strong rumors, credible rumors of someone that they had supposedly killed actually having escaped the noose. they would want to know. They would go after that. They don't. You know who else doesn't go after it? The Jews. There's no Jewish manhunt. Hey, let's send Saul door to door, looking for this escaped Jesus. No, apparently nobody like that in their employ. So, um, you want us to believe the story here. The people who were close to the story, who could have investigated, they didn't believe it. The authorities didn't believe it. So that's my point there. Um,
Here's a reason that I think you can't ignore what you're saying. Some people will say, okay, right, but um, the authorities didn't believe it. They didn't believe the rumors. So what? Um, here's the problem.
they didn't even
So
investigate it, as far as we know.
right, and I'm about to go after that investigation point. If you're a biblical literalist, try that again. If you're a biblical literalist, you do have a bit of a problem. It's Matthew 27, 51 and following. You got a whole bunch. It's not just Jesus. It's not just Jesus walking around undead. There is the zombie apocalypse of Matthew 27. So if you're a biblical literalist, if you're taking that story seriously, and by the way, I would contend that you have to take it seriously, Dave. It was little far afield, but not too much. If you think that it is not silly, if you kind of say, sure, look, this guy was resurrected from the dead after being dead for 3 days. You just want to take this 72-hour thing seriously. Don't see how you do it, but it can be done. Okay. So he's dead for 3 days. Then saying that there are other people who were dead longer who are up walking around as a testament to the resurrection of Jesus doesn't seem to be particularly far-fetched. And if it's not far-fetched, it's not just strong rumor. And it's not just Jesus up walking around.
Okay. Yeah.
Matthew
Yeah,
27, 51 to what is it,
once again,
54?
I'm trying to move on, and you bring up the zombie apocalypse.
But,
You
but what do
know
you
I've
think?
got
I mean, it's
low
not just
impulse
strong
control
rumors.
here.
You've got dead people sleeping in their beds again.
So right, and dead people, presumably, that the authorities could find if they
Well,
wanted, if they wanted to, and
right, they're
so
not hiding.
right, and they're
Well, I mean, I don't know what they're doing. Look,
so
I don't know what zombies do.
I'm just saying, if they had heard that Jesus was out and about and that he has somehow escaped justice, they would at least try to get him again. You would hear
And,
about that story somewhere in history, maybe somewhere. You don't, because it's no one cares.
and by the way, there's no zombie apocalypse in history either for the same reason.
So the Markham problem. Okay, I'm gonna really, folks. This is gonna be the short one. Okay, just read the blog. It's the Markham problem. So Mark is the first.
We're only just over an hour, man. This is 8 points in less than an hour. That's practically warp 8.
Right, but we haven't even covered these last 4 points. I mean, we've just basically read the subtitles of the. So much more I wanted to say. The Markham problem. I would love to talk for an hour about this one, but I'm obviously not going to do that. Mark is the first gospel
I
written.
don't know if it's so obvious, but
In case those of you that are out there thinking that Matthew is the first book written because it's the first one in your Bible, just stop it. Go to Google, read one article, any one, first one that comes up when you put in a proper Google search. So Mark, we get Mark. By the way, there is a case to be made for Matthew coming for. I've read the case. It's not a good one, but someone very clever could, make that case for 5 minutes. Anyway, Mark's first gospel, and the thing that we don't get from the book of Mark is any indication whatsoever that there was supposed to be any witnesses to the resurrection. Because now I want people to understand what I'm not saying here. I'm not saying that in the book of Mark there's no resurrection. There is a resurrection in the book of Mark. Okay, it's done kind of off camera, if you will, but there's a resurrection there. What we don't get are witnesses to the resurrection, and that's the important thing to the story. So, in all the other stories, we do get witnesses to the resurrection because you can't end a book with that. The women in Mark were not witnesses of the resurrection. They didn't see the risen Jesus. They saw an angel, or maybe a boy. Let's call it an angel. It's creepy when you say it's a boy. Um,
It's also creepy when you say it's an angel. Also creepy when you say it's an angel.
I'm doing my best, people. So they only see the angel, and the angel says, go tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus has gone ahead, and they will see him in Galilee. And the women were afraid and told nothing to no one, and that's the end of the story.
Why would it scare you, by the way?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Why would that scare you, by the way? They're scared.
Well,
why?
They are seeing a boy angel sitting in a tomb where there's supposed to be a body. I mean, if you saw a boy angel, I don't know. I
look.
No idea.
I don't take pilgrimages to tombs on Sunday to look. The whole story is weird right here, but I do want to know if I'm quite serious about this. If you're going to the tomb and you've got some idea, so do they have no idea that there was supposed to be a resurrection? Here's why it's important. If you have some idea that there should be a resurrection, and you think, I'm going to go to this tomb with the hopes that there might be, then when there is, why are you scared?
Okay, so this is not a point that I made here. I've made it elsewhere. I don't want to recapitulate it, but now you're forcing me.
Okay, and I'm not done, but go ahead with this, because I don't understand this now. I didn't understand this as a Christian.
So Jesus told them that he was going to rise,
right?
And
so why
he had raised the dead, and they knew it, and so
he
they
did
knew
more than that. He walked on water. He calmed the seas. He fed thousands, according to the story. He could curse trees.
They told him he was going to. He told them that he was going to die. He told them that he was going to come back. And even if you kind of are thinking, no, this is the end of the story for sure, right here, you got to give the benefit of the doubt. And on day 3, just kind of, I was just kind of in the neighborhood of the tomb, just wanted to, see. You got to think that somebody would be hanging out there, just as a way of, checking it out. 0 people, 0 of his disciples were there. Not 2 of them, not the women. The women were not there to see him rise. They were there to anoint the body, because from their perspective, he was just dead. There was no thing in their mind thinking, well, maybe. So anyway, go ahead.
I'm quite serious. One more point here, and then I'll leave it. So let me ask you. Maybe this is just a failure of language. Okay, and so Christians, I'm being serious, but I'm willing to acknowledge a sort of failure of language here. But I still won't understand the story, even if this is a failure of language. So here's what you have. So let's say that these people have never heard whispers of a great resurrection. These women, they go, and they don't know anything about it, right? So they don't expect to encounter a, a, a risen story. No, fine. But make no mistake about it, these are people friendly to Jesus. These are Jesus supporters. Okay. Now, I'll just say this, and maybe it's my own psychological makeup. But if I had a dear friend, uh, someone that I cared a great deal about, maybe even enough to conform my life around. Perhaps I'm not a very good friend because I do that particularly well. But let's just say there was, and I hear that they've died. So 3 days later, right? I don't go that night. By the way, I'm a good Southerner about it. I wait until the body viewing or whatever. And so I hop off over to the tomb, and this is a person that I care about, and they have religious significance maybe in my life, and so they're risen. I still want to know, why am I scared?
I don't know. I don't know. Um, Angels
Why
pop in and
am
out
I
of
scared?
stories all the time, and sometimes people are scared, and sometimes they're joyful, and it just depends on what the author needs them to be
Sure,
at
but I
that
mean the
moment.
angel notwithstanding, right? Because I mean, look, the angel. Okay, maybe I'm scared of the angel. Like, maybe he was part of the zombie uprising,
Well,
and
I mean,
the angel has
he's got
distorted facial features.
the head of a goat, and
Right.
the body of a boy.
Right. He's got that weird forked tongue every time he licks his lips, or no,
Yeah.
whatever. Maybe the angel's creepy. Yeah. But the angel being scary does not impact, I think, how I would feel about that close friend being resurrected. The angel doesn't make it make sense
No,
that they're
no,
scared.
it doesn't. It doesn't explain the fear. Um, I you,
Sorry, I know this ran long. This one has always bothered me. I didn't understand it as a Christian.
right.
Don't understand it
So
now.
let me. So there are no witnesses in Mark. This is part of the Markan problem here, and other gospel writers correct it. No, no, no. We need witnesses. So they write in some witnesses and a much longer story. But the other thing, uh, sorry for the adjustment here. The other thing that you don't get uh, in the Markan story is an ascension. There's no now the reason we don't have an ascension, of course, is because nobody saw Jesus, so no one saw him rise either. But I mean, there's no hint of an ascension. So even if you just kind of take the story out a little bit further in your mind, okay, well, Jesus is setting up camp in Galilee, so he should still be there today. So you might think that at some point some believers are like, "Where's Jesus?" This takes us to our final point. Where's he now? Where's Jesus? Let's play. Where is Jesus? So Mark doesn't answer that question. Once again, maybe that's not a question that exists in his day. Um, and then Matthew, little known fact, Matthew doesn't have an ascension either. Don't know if you know that. So it's not just Mark. Now, Matthew, frankly, copies 90% of Mark. So it's not a real shock that uh, there's no ascension in Matthew. But Matthew does give us some witnesses because, I mean, come on, Mark, no witnesses? So we don't actually get an ascension until Luke. And Luke kind of gives us two ascension stories, and they're both different. Uh, I don't think we have time to get into it. If we had had more time, I would have gone into some of the differences between Luke 1 and Luke 2 in the ascension story, but I'll give you guys a chance to do some of that on your own. Let me just ask you the question to help guide your homework. How long was Jesus on earth after the resurrection and before the ascension? There's your homework. Um, so where's Jesus? Well, Mark doesn't give us an ascension, and Luke does give us an ascension, but we know that Luke, especially Luke Acts, was written much later. Um, so now we've got to explain where Jesus is, because there are people walking around at that time who can clearly see. I've walked all up and down Galilee. I don't see him. I couldn't find him. Is there a secret location where can you produce this Jesus guy who is visible to his disciples in Galilee? And Luke says, yeah, about that. Um, so he gave them a commission, and then he floated up out of the universe, but he'll be back. So just keep watching the sky. He'll be right back. John has in John, I want to say 14, has Jesus in this conversation with Philip saying that he has to go and prepare a place for them in his father's house with the many rooms. Um, Andrew, why did Jesus have to ascend and go back to heaven at all? Was it faulty plumbing in the human section? Was he in charge of the construction? Did they need a new contractor? What was the deal? What does he have to do? Did he have to rule some angels in heaven? I mean, he had some pretty important business, it seems like, to take care of here on earth. He couldn't be bothered to stick around even for the first Pentecost where the church is established in Acts 2. He had urgent business elsewhere. Why is there an ascension at all?
For me, today I think it's pretty clear. If you have a body of a religious figure, the way the Christian story is built, if you have a body of Jesus, you also have the body of the story. The story dies with it. The very moment that body remains in the ground, there is no Christianity as we know it today, because it's much harder to tell the story. Oh, no, there really is this thing. There's this spirit part of us, and it goes to live with our with our spirit overlord in some place which at that time was not outside the universe. We were still hoping to find God in the very big. We didn't. So eventually God moves outside space and time. But at that time, I think the reason that you have this sort of ascension story is to hide the dead body. And why do you need to hide the dead body? The reason you need to hide it is for the same reason that Christians need to hide it today. Because the moment there's a dead body, it's a dead religion.
Well, that'll shut it down from my perspective. I did promise you some time at the end of this to talk about why you found the story also not just unconvincing, but uninteresting. And let's see, not we went through this. Not,
Unbelievable, unconvincing, yeah. Look,
yeah, we went.
I only have one.
Unimportant.
It's so unimportant, neither of us even remember to say it's okay. So, apologies for the background ring there. So, I pared my final comments down to this one thing, and it's something that I think we can kick around pretty easily. I did some research in the run-up And one of the things that I was interested in was what percentage of people in the ancient Near East believed in the earth being flat at the time of the Jesus story. Now, as it turns out, I think I was wrong about the percentage of people who probably thought the earth was flat. The the idea of the earth being a sphere actually predates the Jesus story by quite a ways, as much as 3 to 5 centuries. And it appears to have been quite an accepted fact among the well educated, even in the time of Jesus. Now, there were still quite a lot of people who thought that it was flat, but the ideas were in tension with each other at the time. And apparently quite a lot of church fathers supported the notion of a sphere, though what they thought about the cosmos is certainly not as developed as what we think today. But here is my point. I can identify today people who at that time thought the earth was the center of the universe. I can tell you where they lived. I can tell you who they are. I can tell you who those church fathers were. We can identify problems with their cosmology and reasons that we don't believe today, the things that they believed then about the world that we live in. I don't disbelieve the I don't disbelieve the Jesus story because they had faulty cosmology. But I do disbelieve the Jesus story for the same reason I disbelieve their cosmology. And that is that there is no good reason to think that someone lived and died and then died and lived and was somehow materially transported off the face. Look, what happened to the Jesus body after it went into the clouds? Did it dematerialize? I don't know, because the story doesn't make sense today. It made some sense to some people at that time and at that place, but I don't believe that story for the same reason that I don't believe their cosmology. Or at least if there are traits of their cosmology that I accept, like the Earth being roughly spherical, an oblate spheroid, there may have been some people who believed it. They had good reason to believe it. Do I think there was a Jesus? Maybe there was. Do I think that he was resurrected after 3 days and that he ascended? No. The same reason I don't believe the earth is flat. There's no good reason to believe it.
Okay, and with that, um, I think we're going to call it a show. I am making some preparations to start working in greater earnest on my actual Jesus project. I wanted to get the resurrection off the table, the same way that I wanted to get mythicism off the table. So it's off as far as I'm concerned. There's one other project that I might do, that I might put out. I'm definitely going to do, but I might put out before my project, one on the parables. I'm thinking about how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to start actually writing and recording that one pretty soon, and we'll see. So look out for something on the parables from me. When you see me putting out work on the parables, you'll know that the project is probably the end of that is somewhere in sight. Until then, you may not see me doing as much long form recording. I'll probably pop in to do a 5 or 10 minute solo show every now and then. And to be perfectly frank, most of that will just be tuning my equipment in public. So So I'm going to probably fade out a little bit at this point. Andrew will not be available on the board, so don't try to smoke him out. Um, he already has made a commitment to not spend as much time on the board, and we're going to try to honor that. And I appreciate you taking the time to help me cover this topic. And with that said, goodbye, everybody.